Well, hello, Dragon family. Happy Monday to you. It's really pleasant outside, but trying to do a thunderstorm or something, I don't know, it just moves you into that fall quiet space. A little cloudy, but really pleasant, like 80 degrees still. Um, anyway, so it's been a beautiful week, and I realized once again, man, the weeks are flying by. You know, when we're no longer like really attached into the time-space continuum, you really lose track of it, and it's amazing at the end of it. I always have this in my conversations where at the end of the day I can look back to the morning where the day started, and so many things happened and flowed within that space, and I'm astounded how much could actually occur in a short time span, or what felt like a short time span, because it felt like it was like, where'd the day go? And yet so many things wove into it. And I know that's because we're disconnecting from it. It's been happening for about 4 years or so, where we're really not ensconced and anchored in the time-space continuum anymore in the same way. So if you're noticing that, feeling that, just know that it's a good sign. We're breaking out of the old pattern and system and going into a reset into our true relationship with those two vectors. And they're not the only two vectors that we interact with when we get into the higher dimensional planes. So just sort of fun. But on another note, I had a great question this week that I wanted to go into. Someone emailed me, and I emailed them back. I said, you know, this would be a great question to do on a live, because there's probably a lot of people feeling or wondering that, wondering where that connection is. So I'll read you the email. Of course, I need to put my cheaters on to do that. So she's working out communications with her dragon. She says, when I mentioned it to an aware friend, she said she saw or felt that there were eagles, full-grown eagle-sized beings, perhaps in a greenish color range around me, that were also associated or working with the sky dragons. You encountered them before, and do you have more information on them? Also, have you ever heard of the dragons being referred to as the bird tribe? And the reason for bird was said that when they saw us, they thought we were birds. So obviously there's a couple parts to that question. And I want to start with the fact that the bird tribes, in that sense, most definitely, there are many, many beings that are avian species that would be considered eagle-like, griffin-like, phoenix-like. Many of those that are beings that are around us, whether they're full-sized eagles, maybe they have different heads. There are so many beings, and I feel like they're all part of the bird tribes. And what I mean by that is, when I first read the book, and the first time I ever heard the term bird tribes, it was a Barbara Marciniak book called Return of the Bird Tribes. And I highly recommend reading it if you are curious, if you're having this trigger with these words, if you haven't read it. It's really, really a great piece. And what it was for me, I read it, oh my gosh, probably 20 years ago, or 18. Anyway, quite a long time ago. And for me, it was at the beginning of my awakening and my journey. And I remember finally feeling like, oh my goodness, somebody has put into black and white everything that has been coming up for me. All of these pieces, all these clicks and ahas, and it's like, boom, there it is in black and white. I'm not crazy. This is what I'm experiencing. And this is really a part of why my work is out there, The Dragon Within, so that you can have those experiences with the dragons, or read it and go, I know I'm not crazy. It's why we started this group, right? So the bird tribes back then, and she's channeling a Pleiadian set of beings. And they were very much avian bird-like beings. But for me, the bird tribes are all of those of that higher dimensional platform that come from those avian type races that would be considered avian down in this density of vibration. You know, if we're all actually energy, and everything's energy, what we perceive, we put a label on it based on our perception point from where we sit here. So if we were in a higher platform, maybe we were up in the Pleiades, or maybe we were up in Arcturus, we would not necessarily attribute that term to it because we interact with them very differently in those higher vibrational platforms where they don't densify so much into form. They do that for our benefit coming from Earth to interact with them. And so we put labels and we have all these strings, but really there's a large group of beings. You could imagine it like all of those, whether it's Phoenix, Griffin, condors, eagles, dragons, any of the winged beings that all here have an avian, what do you call it, genetic species or genus, I guess it is. I forgot all my Latin terms from all my biology days. But all of those, if you imagine that being like a family tree of lineages that are all connected and in the same line of work, of service, of things that they're associated with, that to me is the bird tribes. Any of those that are that. So I've talked many times about the fact that the dragons are more avian than reptilian. Even I actually learned that as a fact when there was a dinosaur exhibit here in Reno at the Kids Museum, and they had a whole display, and it talked about the connection between the majority of the dinosaur fossils actually being avian species. And that just triggered this likeness of, yes, I felt that, knew that about the dragons. And, you know, they're hollow bone, they can fly, it's so many similarities. But this aspect of bird tribes, it's not limited to the dragons. I would attribute them as, yes, they are part of the bird tribes. But for me, the bird tribes are all of these beings, and you could almost look at it like the Galactic Masters or higher level galactic councils that are working together. For some reason, I'm thinking of Commander Ashtar's legions are coming in, and that's a different framework. That's not the bird tribes, but it's a similar thing where there's these upper level beings that are here assisting through different energetic formats. And so the bird tribes would be those, and I would say don't limit it to just dragons being part of those bird tribes, or how are they associated with the eagles, and being confused if I'm seeing or feeling eagles around me, does that negate or contradict in any way the work with the dragons? No, they're all higher level beings that are here. And if there are eagle type beings or phoenix type beings or griffin type beings or you know, whatever type, whether it's specifically bird tribe or others, those are the guides that are coming forward to activate you. You might have dragon at your core, you might have dragon connection, but we need all these pieces to get where we're going. And so way back in the beginning of my journey, I had the dragons started to trickle in, but for me, there were other pieces that had to come through information that she wrote about the return of the bird tribes. And as it comes full circle, and I recognize now, all the dragon connection was part of that, but I didn't know it at that point. So we get all these breadcrumbs and puzzle pieces together as we follow what our guides put in front of us and find the connections, find where they weave together. So I love that question because I have had interactions with them, and all of it's possible. So don't negate or push away any help or feel like, whoa, if I'm working with the dragons, I can't work with these beings. If they're showing up as part of your team, embrace it is what I would say. And I'll just check and make sure I answered all of the questions in that. Do I have any more information on them specifically of the eagles? Other than that, what I just shared, I don't. That's my full take on who the bird tribes be, who the eagle beings might be. I do feel like for some reason the information is coming to discuss how dragon riders operate, that we have, many of you are familiar with this concept of dragon and rider and them being a team. They're like a twin flame connection. They've got a split level where if something happens to the rider, something happens to the dragon. It's very much like a twin flame split energetically. And what I'm being shown right now is that there is very similarly with all of the avian bird tribes that are all connected to that nomenclature, that don't rule out the possibility of a rider relationship. Something like eagle riders or griffin riders or phoenix riders, that there are aspects that are, some of you watching this or listening to this need to pay attention to. All right, if there's such thing as a dragon rider, where does that fit in with these beings that I'm working with? And do I have memory associated with anything to do with being their rider or their being my rider? And it can be also any species, like they're showing me right now to the Avatar films. So those incredible beings that are very much like big dragon birds, how you connect in and you ride together, that kind of connected, energetic in movement, in flying, and communicating, that there's something about that to also pay attention to, not just with species you might recognize like an eagle or a phoenix, that big winged beings that maybe you will recognize when you open and let them approach you, but they might look like nothing you've ever seen before from this realm. So they're saying in another way, don't limit your experience if the bird tribes are coming in for you or there's a hit happening and listening to this. The dragons might bring along some friends or bring something forward that introduces you to another type of being of that family tree that is important for you to remember. So really love that little opening into a little different topic, a little different exposure to what else is associated with the dragons. And they're not particularly dragons, but they're part of that larger tree lineage of that upline of all the avian species. So I feel like for some reason I want to draw a card for us. I wasn't planning on this, but I'm feeling drawn to do it. So let me just pull my deck here and shuffle it real quickly, because for some reason with this whole bird tribes aspect, there is a question or a message wanting to come in forward, and they're using the dragons to deliver that message. So even though it's going to be coming from a specific dragon, there's a avian being that is going to use the card deck to bring through a specific message for the majority of you that are either on live, and I see those of you that are, or those that are catching the replay, because many of you do that on the YouTube channel. You go and watch it later, which is ideal. It's in your time frame when you can actually listen and pay attention. You're not trying to focus on, is the phone ringing at my desk kind of thing. So there's a message that is coming from another being that wants to use the Oracle deck to bring it through. So let me feel where that is. All right. Oh, very interesting. So the moon dragon is what popped up. And let's just look at the moon dragon for a second and feel that. I'm going to put it up here and cover the canvas. There we go, same size. So feel the moon dragon. And the moon dragon, I'm going to have to read the message to see what the specific share is. Embrace, yielding, and grace. And let me find her in the book. A beautiful moon dragon. Gotta remember which section I put the sun and the moon. There she is. Tenderness. If the moon dragon is before you, you may need to soften in some area of your life or your being. Let the moon dragon bring you to her lair, to dance in a river of tenderness, grace, beauty, and softness. You have possibly forgotten this stream of grace, or maybe you covered it over with the belief that you don't deserve such embrace. It may be, too, that someone in your life needs to feel that from you. Is there a situation that requires you to yield your own demands or needs in order to show another this stream of grace and tenderness? We all have many facets, and true grace is an ability to flow between them as we recognize the energy of each situation. Rigidity never serves. Yielding doesn't always mean surrender. So I'm asking as I'm reading that, what is this being, this particular being, because I can feel him standing behind the dragon, but it's not a being that I would recognize, sort of like I was talking about before. Let's not limit the beings that want to show up, because there's something about this access to the bird tribes and these higher levels of beings that are associated with the dragons. They're in league with them. And it's like they're standing behind me so that I can't see it. And they're standing in like sort of a gray cloak over the being, but I can feel their bird aspect. But it's the my question was, as I was reading that, what part of this is the message that this being is trying to convey for those of you that have this connection with the bird tribes opening? And it's this last piece that really hit was rigidity never serves. We all have many facets, and true grace has an ability to flow between them as we recognize the energy of each situation. Rigidity never serves. So part of what's happening energetically right now, and this is interesting because it's connected to what I went into with my Quantum Flight group last week, is moving into the perception of our reality being deconstructed. So this being is stepping forward, but not revealing themselves or keeping themselves in an energetic where it's pure communication, and that I don't have to label or put something on an identifier for me to be able to categorize it, catalog it, feel comfortable with the communications and the information being shared. It's about rigidity, and rigidity in our structural reality, rigidity in how we want to communicate and who we want to communicate with. We want to be comfortable. We want to recognize them. We want to have all the answers now. And that's very rigid of us in a way that stops us from flow. And so when these beings step forward that maybe we don't recognize, and that was interesting when that was even coming through, like there's other kinds of beings, sort of like an avatar, that we don't necessarily recognize or have terms for. And we are limiting, what I'm getting right now is we are limiting our growth by needing a construct that we recognize. And so moving forward, as we deconstruct our reality and what we've known it to be, or allow ourselves to let go of rigidity in what we're experiencing, that's going to open up the gateways for communications with these other beings that feel like, and he does feel like this, that it is masculine energy, at least that's what I'm perceiving, has felt sort of relegated to the background, having to communicate through other messengers, sort of like using the Oracle deck, using the dragons to get this message across, because we're not comfortable inviting them into the space if we don't recognize what they are. And we're really limiting ourselves by how much growth we can continue to make if we don't have that field of full potential open to embrace the information that's coming without seeing and knowing the messenger, and being able to trust and surrender that into that. If our guides are presenting it, do I feel safe and not need to protect myself or feel like it's a negative energy coming? Negative only exists in the 3D reality. If we're moving into 5D, we're out of polarized field. You'll feel that unified energy. If you focus on inviting in and feeling the unified energetic state of the being that's communicating or trying to communicate with you, they can show you wondrous worlds. And I remember being taken in session with one of my dragon hearts to their planet that was outside of this universe. It was absolutely stunning. It was one of the most incredible places I've ever gotten to visit energetically. And it was because I was wide open. I was wide open, like, whoa, all right, here we go. And when we stay in that, they're repeating again, rigidity never serves. So where are we being rigid in our lives? Where are you rigid in your construct of how you want your path to look? What does my practice need to look like? What does my waking up, my ascension path need to look like? We can't be in flow and live in flow if we have rigidity in any vector of our life. So allowing that to be another aspect where it's not just about flow from your heart into every part of your day, or what you're motivated in, what you're feeling drawn to, what you're feeling inspired by. This is why I only do lives when I'm like, here it comes. It's time to do a live. And so sometimes it's longer than a week in between. Being in that flow, that's one way. But how do we be in flow in this other way that's being presented today, where there's other beings that are ready to communicate with us, in particular associated with these bird tribes, that if we can get out of our rigidity of needing to recognize or put a label and a name to them, there's a whole bunch of growth ready to happen. So hopefully that's helpful to you. I can feel this being, and it's just like this beautiful gray presence. That's all they're letting me pick up. But it was, they're saying, perfectly delivered message. It's exactly what I what they wanted to share. And so just allowing that to be received. Where do you receive it in your body? Where do you feel most rigidity coming up when you look at rigidity and flow in that context? So hope you have a great week with that energy. I feel like I'm going to mention discovery calls. I have some openings in the schedule, so look for those. If we haven't worked together yet, or you've been having questions, you can always email them to me. But if you have questions that you wanted to go over, or it's not a reading, but if you feel like, you know what, I just want to have a short discussion with you, take advantage of one of those discovery calls. You're only allowed one. So if you've had one before, you might need to book a short reading, but they're there on the Book Now button, homepage of dragonwithin.com. You'll find the schedule, you'll find all the possible kinds of sessions, and just reach for that free discovery call. All right, have a great week. We'll see you when we see you. Bye for now.